The evolving nature of leadership. Welcome to Leadership Theory and Applications, EDLR 7302, Week 1. This class is giving you an opportunity to be a critical learner of leadership. Leadership is an interesting topic. Everyone wants to know what makes a great leader, what makes a bad leader. We see it in schools, we see it in politics, we see it in business, we see it everywhere. What makes a great leader? The point of this class is not for you to learn a bunch of theories and to memorize them for a test, but it is to apply the theories in your own leadership journey. You're going to evaluate your own type of leadership. What do you believe about leadership? Who are you as a leader? And you're going to take all of that information and it's going to help you guide yourself once you complete this degree. So I'm really excited to share this topic with you. And I hope you're ready for an incredible journey of understanding who you are as a leader and where you're planning to go. So why do we study leadership? Why do you care? It's because we are always seeking out someone to follow. We want leaders, and we end up being leaders ourselves in different situations. So this really touches who we are as people. It's about our values. What do we believe in? The four most important threats facing the world today are nuclear or biological catastrophe, a worldwide epidemic, tribalism and its cruel offspring of assimilation, and finally the leadership of our human institutions. But in fact, what we're doing is we're saying we want to change the world. Something's not right and somebody needs to step up. And so we are constantly looking for someone to step up. And so to understand what makes a great leader is very, very important. So that's why we study leadership, because we want change to go towards the positive development of our culture and climate of our communities. Can you think of a time when we did not need a leader? There are people that have stood out in our lives, both social, political, and scientifically, that have required leadership. For many people, they'll say their first knowledge or the first time they learned about leadership was from their own parents. How did their parents raise them? Were they autocratic parents? Were they laissez-faire parents? Were they people that taught you the difference between right and wrong? There's just a million situations out there in which we claim the need for a leader. And you look at the faces of the people here, we have good leaders and we have bad leaders, but what's the difference? Leadership is not just about doing the right thing. A lot of times leaders lead people the wrong way. You can see faces in this group of people who change the world for a better place. And then you see others that change the world towards almost its own annihilation. So why do we study leadership? I think this is a time more than ever that we have to look to our leaders and say, are they taking us in the right direction or not? We have to identify the patterns of leadership. What's good, what's bad, what's helpful for all people. And I think it's also important to bring up the fact that social justice is going to play very much a big part of the leadership analysis. How are we making sure that everyone is treated fairly, equitably? Notice I didn't say equally, because equality and equity are two different things. And we tend to go towards wanting everybody to be equally treated. But in fact, we want it to be treated equitably. In fact, I want people to see that not everybody has to be treated exactly the same, but based on their needs and what they need to do in life. Look at these leaders. Some of them are amazing. Some of them scare you to death. So let's find out why we study leadership and be able to break this whole pattern down. Why do we study leadership? I love this quote from Dugan's book. There are few times in history that are not characterized by a combination of social, political, and scientific issues that require leadership. We require leadership in every facet of our lives. We want people that are going to lead us well, and we ourselves want to lead well. Every single person, you, me, your family members, everyone takes on some type of leadership position, be it in a family, be it at work, be it in a marriage. We all have roles to take. But looking at our history, look at the faces of the people on this slide. Every single person is a leader. Now, some of you might say, well, there's some people in there that I would not consider a good leader, but we're not doing that right now. We're not judging good or bad. We're judging or evaluating the characteristics they had or have now that has caused people to follow them. They have a sense of influence that has changed our world. Every single one of those people. Now, whether they changed it for the good or the bad is what we must debate. But we can't put aside the fact that they had influence and they made significant changes in our world. So why do we study leadership? We have no choice. That's the only way we're going to survive as a society. So theories of leadership, that's the main point of this class. We're going to study all the different theories of leadership. But let's break down. We're going to spend a lot of time in the next few slides just discussing basic vocabulary. So we're all coming in on this topic with the same word bank, so to speak. We talk about formal theory and formal leadership theory or formal theories. It's seen as scientific, it's academic, it's been tested. I think that's the most important thing. It's been tested, it's been researched. And there are a lot of studies surrounding formal theories. And they're fascinating. But they come from all different directions. It's really amazing how they develop over time. Then what we have is informal theory, and that's your subconscious thinking of the way a world or a particular phenomena operates. So in this sense, what I'm going to be asking you to do very soon within this course first module is to identify what your informal theory of leadership is. What do you think makes a great leader? Why are you a great leader? What is it that you do that makes you a great leader? Or what do you want to do or want to be to become a great leader? And from that informal theory, we're going to work towards finding out that formal theory. We're going to break down your informal theory into pieces, and you're going to be able to identify where that idea came from. My father is in the military. My theory of leadership has a lot to do with authority, which has a lot to do with servant leadership, transformational leadership. But then once I looked at the connecting formal theories from my informal theory, it ended up changing the way I think about leadership. So I hope this is going to be a really interesting journey as we go from your informal to a formal, and then back to your informal theory based on what you have learned in this class. When you look at Dugan's theories and in his book, especially his architecture of leadership theory, I think it's really fascinating of how he puts this together so that we can understand all of the different theories and how they're put together. So he breaks it down as how you would build a house and the parts of the house. So he talks about theory development being the foundation, and then we work from the foundation to the footings, which is, and I'm going to try to say this word well, paradigmatically derived, socially constructed, value-based, interdisciplinary, into the framing and which we ask those questions of born versus made. leader versus leadership, leader versus follower, leadership versus manager, authority versus power, and macro versus micro. So he has a way in this book, and I hope you're enjoying the read because it's not a difficult book to read. It's actually probably one of the less difficult or challenging books you'll ever read on leadership because he has a great way of breaking this all down. But this is an opportunity to see how leadership theory is built. How do we get to understanding and informing what leadership is and what it means to us? So leadership theory. Bass is one of the foremost experts on leadership theories, and I would really recommend as you start developing your own theories and looking at your theoretical framework for your dissertation, which we'll talk about later. He's an excellent researcher who can explain what leadership theory is. He states it's to explain its emergence or its nature and its consequences. That's what the theory is. Where did it come from? How does it behave? And what happens due to its behavior? It's an attempt to explain the nature of leaders and leadership as a social phenomena. So I know a lot of people sit back and they go, well, why do I want to follow that person? Why do I want to listen to them? Why am I influenced by that person? I want to know where it came from. And am I reading between the lines? Am I being, manipulated by someone? We are going to identify this because we want to know, in theory, where it came from in the first place. Now, we will be sliding in a lot of biblical truth about leadership because this is a Christian university. I do want to emphasize the fact that we do take the place of, or the stance that everything is created through God. He created leaders. He's the ultimate leader. I am encouraging you that one of the best books on leadership is the Bible. I think if you go through and look at every single leader, or what you would not think as a leader, but as someone who is taking on leadership responsibilities and influence, you can almost see every single theory in the Bible, from Moses to Joseph to Abigail, which is someone you might not be aware of, David, to Jesus, to Paul. Every single leader is represented in the Bible, every single theory of leadership. And it's really encouraging that God allows people to fail at leadership and then he equips them to be successful leaders. So that's just one beginning piece of how we are going to connect our faith to leadership. All right, your first assignment, but don't go anywhere. Write down on a piece of paper right now. What is your theory? What makes a great leader? What does a leader do that makes them someone you would want to follow, listen to, be influenced by? Write that out right now. Take some time. Don't go any further. Once you've finished writing your theory of what makes a great leader, then you can go on to the next slide. All right, going back to the foundation again. Now we've talked about leadership theory and the clarification of this terminology. I want to make it clear. We are studying theory. We're not studying leadership development. There's a difference. Theory is that understanding of propositions that offer an explanation, a descriptive insight to leadership. Leadership development is how we develop or grow leaders. I'm not, probably offshoot of this class will be the fact that you will develop as a leader because you're going to be able to evaluate yourself as a leader and understand your tendencies as a leader of what you do and don't do, as a leader, and hopefully this will grow you in leadership. But the main focus of this class is just understanding different leadership theories. Now we will talk a little bit about leadership development as part of the foundation of leadership. And that is broken down, Dugan breaks it down into four pieces. Leadership capacity, it's how are you able to be a leader? Do you have the skills? Do you have the openings? My husband will say, do you have the bandwidth to be a leader? And we study this in schools in the sense that I'm trying to build teacher leadership capacity. I want them to be able to be more involved. So how involved are you? Do you want to help make decisions and make changes? We also talk about leadership enactment. How are you behaving as a leader? What are you doing as a leader? I love it when I have people that are quick to tell everybody what to do, but not able to get down into the weeds and help them do it. I think that comes when you're trying to delegate. How are you helping people do what they need to do? Leadership motivation. Why do you lead? There are some people that lead because they want the power, which is amazing to me. I don't quite understand that, but someone would often say that's probably why I became a leader. I wanted the power. I didn't want the power, I wanted the influence. I wanted to be able to change the world. I'm an educator, and my whole goal is to make people see their possibilities in their lives. I don't want them to sit back. And finally, leadership efficacy. You see, Bandura is a big researcher on efficacy, and that's just being able to do something. I feel comfortable in this role. I feel like I'm going to make a difference in this world. Wow, if you want to get in a debate with somebody, you would want to talk about whether leaders are born or made. That's probably one of the most interesting conversations I have with anybody. And when I ask them, do you think leaders are born or made? And a lot of people say, well, they're born that way. You know, you can see it with a baby, they're born that way. But mainly we're talking about some leaders are born because they are born leaders because it was their father was king and their father died and they became king, whether they were ready or not, or they had the skills or not, they got that leadership role. Research has been showing that actually people can be developed as leaders. I personally have seen people that say, oh, I'm not a leader, and then they step up and they do some incredible leadership. I had a counselor once who did not want to participate in the leadership in the school. And after I worked with her and talked to her and gave her opportunities to speak, she became one of the strongest leaders and advocate for students in our school. So yeah, I can see people saying born, but the research is really showing that people can be developed as leaders and made into leaders. Then we look at the difference between leader and leadership, meaning leader is a person, leadership is the behavior or the act of leadership. Leader versus follower. I think we're all leaders and we're all followers. I don't think anybody can walk around and say, yeah, I'm a follower all the time. I don't think so. There's opportunities and times when you are leading and following. Authority versus power is an interesting concept. I can be given authority to make changes. I can be a manager and I have given authority. Doesn't particularly mean I have the power to make it happen. So that's a fascinating concept. I encourage you to read more about this. Macro versus micro, we're looking at the very large picture as macro, and I'm looking at, how can I change my whole community versus how can I just change what's happening at my school or my organization. Now, I'm hoping you've written your leadership theory, what you believe is a great leader, by the time you got to this slide. Now we're going to look at the paradigms and their influence on leadership. That's that footing piece. If you go back a few slides, you'll see the house, and we've already talked a little bit about foundation with the leadership theory, but now we're working on the footings. So if you look, you see the different types of paradigms: positivism, constructivism, critical theory, and postmodernism. And then they give you the definition of each one. Now look at the presumptions about leadership. Read these carefully. After you read these, I want you to look back at the theory you wrote. Where do you believe your leadership theory's paradigm comes from? Which paradigm does it come from? So read carefully and think about this. And that's going to help you narrow down where your thought process is when it comes to leadership. If you look at your module for this first week, you're going to see a video through Right Now Media from Patrick Lassoni. And I would highly recommend that you watch this video at this time. You can pull away from your PowerPoint and watch this video. It is part of your course. But I do want to throw in a little side note here. Right Now Media is an incredible free media site that you get as an HBU student. And what you are able to do is to download multiple Bible studies, videos, leadership videos. Maxwell has tons and tons of videos on here. Highly recommend that you use these, watch these, help you with not only your growth as a student, but also your growth spiritually. It's an amazing resource that we offer all HBU students. Multiple times during the courses that you're going to take in the next 8 weeks, we ask you to reflect. There's assignments in which you're writing reflections. You're going to be online in discussion groups reflecting on questions based on the readings for this course. But after watching the video, what did Patrick talk about? And can you sit back and reflect on these? Are you a vulnerable leader? I think vulnerability is really a strong trait for a leader. Sometimes we have to be real, and sometimes it means that people can see that you're real. My biggest example in my life is there's been times when I made a mistake as a leader. I didn't do it right, didn't say it right. And for me to come up and say, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up, or even to the point of, I don't really know much about this topic and I need you to help me with it. I'm not the know-it-all. And it's probably one of the best parts of my leadership. I feel really comfortable with being humble, being real. I know what I know and don't know what I don't know, and sometimes what I know isn't right, and I am expecting people to step up. Another example of this would be the fact that I consider my level of ethical responsibility beyond what it is as a professional, but also through my relationship with Christ, that I hold myself accountable to my faith level of faith ethics. And that's hard because that's much higher than what you will see in normal ethical handbooks and requirements. I think I hold myself at that level, and at times I fail miserably, and sometimes I feel like I'm doing okay. But I also open myself up and ask people to say, listen, if at any time you see me working outside of my faith, if I'm doing something opposite to what Jesus Christ has taught us to do and behave, call me out. It's okay. I need that. And I have to say it's happened a couple of times. And I was really honored someone cared that much about me to call me out and help me. So think about that. What is being vulnerable? Can you be vulnerable? And what would that look like? This is the end of Module 1 PowerPoint. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I get better at this by the end. So continue reading and exploring your leadership, and I will see you next week.